Christian parenting.
Welcome to the Living Wholehearted Podcast. We are Jeff and Terra Matson, a husband and wife team who is shrinking the integrity gap in our own lives and helping others do the same. I'm a leadership and organizational development coach, and Terra is a licensed marriage and family therapist.
We believe that if you have a following, you are a leader, and how you lead matters. Whether you are leading in the home, work, or community, we are bringing you biblical, clinical, and relational wisdom to help you in every relationship that matters most to you. None of us do this perfectly, but we are leaning into the reality of our humanity and profound wisdom of grace.
Well, at Living Wholehearted, we love leaders, and leaders can look and lead in so many different ways. We'd love to have them share their insights with you as our audience, and you know that we're trying to bring you people that lead and live committed to integrity. And today we've got a special guest with us to do just that. Many of you, our listeners, are leading in the business world, and others in the church or ministry. Some of you are home full-time, leading in the home, shaping the lives of the actual next generation of CEOs and pastors.
But today we've got Craig Denison with us. Craig's a speaker, worship leader, and the author of First15 Daily Devotional, helping more than 1 million believers in hundreds of countries experience God in a fresh way every day. Craig currently serves as the Chief Executive Officer of Denison Ministries, an organization started by his father, Jim Denison, and includes First15, the Denison Forum, and Christian Parenting. And as you've noticed, the Living Wholehearted Podcast is powered by Christian Parenting, and we have had the privilege of dreaming with Craig over the last many months of what's to come. He's a humble leader, and we want you to get a glimpse of some of the ways Craig balances his leadership of a very large ministry, marriage to his wife, Rachel, and raising their 2 boys in the heart of Texas. Welcome, Craig.
Terra and Jeff, it's so fun that we get to talk off recorded conversations often. And now that we're doing this conversation, I so enjoy the both of you. And so I've been looking forward to this time together.
Well, we've been looking forward to it as well, Craig. And, you know, from our earlier offline conversations, we've learned that your pathway to becoming a CEO of a large organization is a little unorthodox. Tell us the story of how you landed in such a leadership role, and share a bit about the mission of the ministries under the Denison umbrella.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yes, definitely unorthodox. If you were to ask anyone in my family and people close to my family, you know, which of the kids and who of our family would have ended up, you know, working in this ministry my dad started, definitely would not have been me. My best plan for myself was being a guitar player on the back of a stage somewhere. And I was working really hard at that plan. I made the phone call. The one thing my parents told me not to when I went away to school was to drop out of college with a band. And so halfway through my junior year, that's the exact phone call they got. And they could almost tell before I said it. They said, "This is that phone call, isn't it?" That's what they said. I said, "Yeah, this is that phone call." And so I dropped out of school for a while. Honestly, right before that, I started experiencing God in a really transformative way. And so I really believe actually God carried me into that season of leaving school and going full time into music and experiencing what it's like to be in that space, and the pros and cons of that, and the shine of it from the outside and the challenges from the inside, and learning a lot even about the power of worship and being in that space and creating excellent music. But the path went from there to going back to school. I remember being in Spanish class, and my friends are still in the band, traveling, playing music. And I'm thinking, this is a terrible idea. Like, why am I in Spanish class and my friends are recording and traveling and doing really cool and exciting things? But God had a different plan for me, and he had a plan for music being a part of the whole, but not the whole of what I was supposed to do. And that led me to graduating from school, getting married, and called very specifically to serve this ministry my dad had founded in whatever way I could. And I can genuinely say that it was in the process of serving and just trying to add value and meet needs that over time, the value and need that I was led to start offering was being the CEO and not knowing that I would love along the way discovering gifts and a calling related to strategy, content creation, nonprofit strategy, and leadership now at a high level, has been discovering along the way that God kind of helps me create this capacity and not knowing if I'm going to be able to fill it. And then through his grace in the transformation process and failing forward over and over again, God kind of raises me up, and raises all of us up into those things that he calls us to. And so it's been so fun to see that take place. And Denison Ministries, not knowing what we were creating at the time, really has become a holding company for freestanding Christian resources, like you referenced, First15, Denison Forum, and Christian Parenting. And we've been in a rapid growth curve. So we've gone from about 650,000 in audience a couple years ago to now like 4.8 million a month across all of our platforms and brands, and adding voices to the mix, like the both of you and a lot of others' voices. And it's been so fun to see God's plan for creating a modern day Christian media organization that is creating meaningful, transformative content, but using technological advancement to deliver that to believers right where they are and right where they need it. Because we know that as believers are transformed with content, they transform the world around them. Somehow we are the hope for God's kingdom's advancement. He says we're the hope, we're the light of the world and the salt of the earth, and we're his plan. And so the fact that we can play a role in that through meaningful content has been a joy, and seeing how God's bringing growth to the organization in every way has been a really fun process.
Well, as our listeners, are you picking up the passion of this guy? It just oozes out of you, Craig, and we love that about you. And I'll just say that when we think about, and you answered some of this about the practical steps that you've taken to prepare for your role as the CEO. I love that it started with, I just started to serve. And you felt a sense of calling. There was an invitation to take the baton of that your father had started, and take that and to step into this space that that God is creating capacity for, you said, and it was through service. And that posture is a beautiful starting place, something that you'll never release or give up. I sure hope and pray for you in that, and know that your heart's bent in that direction to stay that course. But talk a little bit more about some of the other pieces that prepared you, right? When you think about many of the leaders in our organizations, they have unorthodox stories of becoming the leaders that God called them to be as well. And there are steps in place and people that come into our pictures that resource us. And what are some of the questions that you felt like, gosh, I need to grow here, or I need to take some steps to shore up and learn, that you could share with some of our listeners?
Oh man, such a good question. Yeah. I think the first step that comes to mind is a spiritual one. Like genuinely, I have this metaphor that comes to mind for me often, that the reality of God is often like radio waves and signals, and it's around us all of the time, right? Like the radio signals are always around us, but it's not until you turn the station on a radio to that right frequency that you get to hear it and then embody that and express that to the world around you. And I think experiencing God is like that, where God is all around us always. When we invite him to be here, he's already here, but there's a learning process of how we learn to tune our heart to that frequency, to hear what he's up to, and to hear how he's guiding us and leading us, and to hear that in the moment, to keep our heart turned to that frequency throughout our day. And I'm so grateful to have had experiences and had recognized my need to learn how to do that in times like in college and beyond, and carrying me through different seasons of life, whether it was leading worship or creating content or starting this brand or now moving to the CEO role, and needing to every morning still tune my heart to that frequency, to hear it again, and to try to keep my heart tuned to that frequency in and out of budget meetings, to PR, to whatever it might be, through releasing people on the team, that just we're not a fit for them and they're not a fit for us, and really hard conversations that we have to have as leaders. And so that spiritual step, I think, was the most important one, and preparation. And so clinging to that. The second one is I would say like investing in my gifts, like discovering those gifts and then investing in them. It's so easy to count myself out of opportunities based on the immense weaknesses I know I have. But what I try to do instead is surround myself by wonderful people, and then investing as deeply as I can in and my gifts through failing forward, like not saying no to those opportunities, knowing that I'm going to get better over time and expecting that failing forward process as opposed to letting that keep me from engaging in the opportunities in front of me. Learning and reading and immersing myself. There's a vast amount of good content and resources out there for all kinds of manner of work, especially in the areas of leadership, and podcasts like this one, and just learning and reading and listening to as many things as I can, and finding mentors. And so investing my gifts through mentors, so many providential ways that God's brought the right people to me at the right times, and just really staying consistent with those people, to glean all of the wisdom and advice that I can from them. And then the last thing I would say in terms of a step is of getting to where I am now, and then what this looks like every day, is immersing myself fully in the season that I'm in. Like, I think that often the path that God leads us down, I wish, that he could illuminate the end to me, but what he illuminates is the step right in front of me. And I find that the more fully I give myself to that season, whether it was starting as a content creator and just trying to fill up these pages with as many meaningful words as possible, to leading a small team, to developing strategies related to nonprofits, and now being a full team leader. I just want to give myself as fully as possible to the season that I'm in, as opposed to always leaning into a season that I wish I was in front of me, or maybe even leaning into the comfortability of the past. Just try to be fully present and immersed fully in this season. And I find that that's where God equips me and empowers me the most, as I fully give myself to that, so that he can direct me into what's next for me a little bit better.
So good. I just want to mirror back all those really powerful pieces. I mean, one was the tuning into God's frequency, investing in your gifts, and how easy it is to dismiss those, even as leaders, and to kind of skate through on what we can do versus like growing those. And then, being able to really fully engage in what is today versus always preparing for what's to come, or what you wish to come, or hanging out in the comfort of the past. Such wisdom, Craig. I just want to glean a little bit more, even as you step back, even broader from leadership, and thinking about your time in worship and music, and in the music industry, and now into being a CEO of a very large Christian ministry. What are some of the key principles that you've discovered about who God is, and about what his heartbeat is for his people?
Oh man, yeah, such a good question. I do. And I think one of the great opportunities God gives us is often he invites us into spaces we wouldn't know why. And when we can see in hindsight why he had intention behind each of those things, and how he's kind of weaving together the fabric of this story of our lives, and how that weaves into the story of his broader kingdom. And like, when I look back at my time in music, I can see so many lessons there that apply to being a CEO today that wouldn't sound direct. But one of those is, like, when you're creating something and you go out and then start to create something as a form of business, I think I learned throughout that process of the importance of knowing myself and what I want to make, and the value of uniqueness. Like, there's like, Jeff, you and Terra already exist. I don't need to be the both of you. You guys don't need to be me. I think God's plan for his kingdom is that each of us would embody as fully the unique ways he's made us. Mm-hmm. And as much as we can discover those things and invest in those things and try to express those things as fully as possible, and not let comparison keep us from fully expressing who we are. I think that's such a key principle for being successful in anything we want to do in life, because success looks like being fully yourself as God has made you to be in the earth, not being fully someone else and doing exactly what they do. And it's not a numbers game. It's not a measure of impact in terms of millions or thousands. I mean, God calls each of us where he calls us for a reason, and that is equally important in the advancement of his kingdom. And so, importance of knowing myself and what I want to make, and recognizing that that's going to disclude other people from wanting to be a part of it. And that's actually okay, I think was a really important principle that I got to learn. I've gotten to learn the importance of working together. It's so tempting, and you see this often happen. It's so tempting to go out and just try to make something on your own. And it's can be easier, it can be more comfortable, can feel empowering in a way. But in the context of creating music, music is beautiful by the nature of the things that are surrounding it. And while it was challenging at times trying to write songs and produce songs, and it's challenging today leading an organization with people around me, I think there's this great opportunity that God does make them something better by each of our differences getting fully expressed, and even celebrating those differences, and being willing to work through the friction that happens of working with other people, and not seeing that as a sign even of unhealth always, but sometimes seeing it as a real sign of health that there's friction that exists. And then the last thing is I didn't do this fully at the beginning of my music time. And it was something I started learning along the way. I think it's really important anytime we get into something to understand kind of the model of what it is that we're doing, and whether it's a business model and not just creating those things that make the most sense to us in the moment, but really investing in learning the industry that you're in and really investing in learning kind of frameworks and systems for what God's called you to be. That can be frameworks for healthy families, can be frameworks for healthy organizations, that stages frameworks for the type of industry that you're in. Like just learning how other people are being successful and looking for those ways that you can adopt those things, not as comparison, but as value that someone spent probably a lot of failing forward learning, how you can glean as much value as possible and apply that to your own life. I think is something that has helped me, as a young leader, try to glean from those that are around me and try to implement those things as quickly as possible so we can still be successful despite my age.
Thank you. Talk about the failing forward. You use that phrase throughout your descriptions, and it keeps catching my attention. Where'd you get that, Craig? Was that in one of your songwritings? Is that somebody that you've learned from? But I just love that imagery, failing forward.
Oh gosh, that's a great question, Terra. I should remember. I think probably John Maxwell is where I first experienced that concept of failing forward. Is in one of his writings. I think he might even have an entire book on the subject. It's been a while.
You should look that up.
Yeah, it's so good. But that principle stuck with me, and I think it's a lot of God, even God's plan for us as we're sitting here now. I think inside of all of that is this great opportunity to recognize that, I think that God doesn't expect perfection of us. He just desires a relationship. Yeah. He desires us to be fully with him. And, he knows our frame, and he remembers that we're dust. And so, I so often experience shame when I make a mistake. And oftentimes it's that shame that drives me away from the learning process, where I try to avoid mistakes at all costs. And it's often through my mistakes, my failures, that I actually learn the most and am able to be transformed to become more fully who God is calling me to be and created me to be and who I want to be. And so it reframes it as a positive, which I think is critical in our society that often doesn't value mistakes and doesn't value failure and doesn't give people the ability to grow and progress as a human being and as a Christian and as a parent, as a leader, whatever it might be. And so reframing that as a positive, I think is critical for our own well-being and critical for us saying yes to the process of transformation that God invites us into.
I appreciate that, because it really is a reframe. It's we've got parts of wiring that wants to get it all in place and know that it's going to be perfect. And we've thought through all the potential problems and then we move forward, versus in God's economy, really, it is a relationship with God, and we're trusting him with the consequences of our obedience and the moving forward. And there's a lot of failing with just being in our humanity. And so not being afraid of that. And I think that's just such a beautiful reframe. So thank you for speaking to that.
Yeah, one other thing comes to mind as well from the great theologian Spike Lee.
Yes.
I remember I read something that he wrote on the creative process, and I think this applies to any part of life, where he said the thing that keeps most people from becoming the artist they can be, and so sub in leader, sub in parent, sub in anything, is that they have really great taste, and so they know the first things they try to make aren't good. Because they haven't practiced it. And so their ability to create something isn't lining up with the taste that they've been given, which is actually a gift. And so the way that you actually start creating something that you enjoy and that you value and you think is good is actually just finishing. And so it's starting something and finishing it and knowing that it doesn't measure up with your taste and getting it out, because it's going to be going through the whole of the process so you can do it again and again and again. That actually has you becoming who you want to be and being able to create the things that line up with a good taste that you have. And I found that to be so life-giving, that someone that's so successful as a creative is basically just saying fail forward as quickly and as often as you can, because that will help you line up. And that the fact that it's not good enough is actually a good thing. And I find that to be true with meetings that I walk away from and I thought that meeting wasn't really that great. It was doing the meeting and leading it and trying to glean as many lessons as possible that helps me get to the place to where meetings are lining up with my taste, that I walk away and think, oh, that was good. And we got the right things out of that. And I'm minded for conflict in the right ways, but was failing forward and getting as many of those under my belt as possible that helped make that possible.
I love it. It's, I often find myself when I feel like I'm failing forward, I throw up these prayers and I'm like, Lord, your power is made perfect in my weakness. Make something out of those loaves and fishes, just multiply it. And so just that balance of, again, appreciating it, moving forward, finishing. I love it. So
yeah, it's great. Now, Craig, your dad was a founder of Denison Ministries, and many founding leaders have a hard time passing their babies on to the next generation, and in family business or to someone else in general. Ministries can create additional concerns. From your experience, can you pass on wisdom to us about what works well and what should be avoided in these types of succession situations?
Oh man, it's such a great question. I feel like there needs to be more content around this. And so my mind has been spinning lately, as we're kind of closing out this first, couple of years season of this transition that we've been in. Maybe the early lessons that we've been learning are as a team and as a family and all of that. Cause I think this doesn't happen well very often. And, we've been, experiencing a lot in the midst of it. And so, I think there'll be more to come on this, but the first thing that comes to mind for me when you ask this is humility. I think has to be the core value, and it has to be your core cultural value of an organization. If you're going to prioritize anything over everything else, I think it has to be humility. And honestly, my father and his co-founder, Jeff Bird, who's the president of our organization and is now reports to me and is on my leadership team, was just such a step of humility for him as someone that is at the end of his career and has led plenty of organizations and churches and is now in the leadership team of someone who's 32. He's more of my uncle than my uncles are. I've known him my entire life, and he's been such a gift at this transition as well. They both really do embody humility. And so when it started to recognize that there was a different leadership style and engagement that was going to be needed for the scalability of our organization, of where they both genuinely felt God was calling the organization next and calling them next, that they really created a room around the table for me and for others, and really genuinely created that room and made a pretty fast switch in their minds, which I think is the transition a lot of people that are passing something that someone else have a hard time making, of reframing what success looks like. That success is no longer their own contribution, first and foremost, but it's helping someone else get their highest and best contribution. That's a hard transition to make. And I think it genuinely requires humility and it requires awareness. And they've done such a phenomenal job with that. And I think is a lesson that's critical. And the need for me to approach that with humility as well, of being willing to learn lessons that have come in the past and get wise counsel and recognize and be open when I'm making mistakes as I'm failing forward often. And so I think that process of humility and maintaining that value and hiring around that value and trying to keep that value at the forefront at all times has been one of the key parts of our lessons that we've been learning. The second thing gets more specific, and there's a resource around this. There's a book called Managing Transitions by William Bridges. This is going to sound like snooty in a way or snobbish, so I'll just go and throw it out there and I'll just own it. So I was in London, meeting with a group of Christian leaders under the age of 40. It's kind of an international gathering of Christian leaders, that this organization was putting together that I love. And, sat down next to me at dinner one night. There's a guy named Jim Liskey who took over prison fellowship from Chuck Colson. And a guy across the table that I know well said, "Hey, you need to talk to Jim," with Jim right in earshot, and said, "Jim could be a huge resource for you." And so I just picked his ear all night and he gave me this book, Managing Transitions, and I read it on the plane. And then I kid you not, the next week I was making a presentation to a group of Dallas business owners about First15 and creating funding opportunities for First15. And someone was there that works with the Table Group. You guys might be familiar with Pat Lencioni and Table Group Resources. So Krista is her name. She works with the Table Group as a Table Group consultant. And she came up to me after and said, "You need to read Managing Transitions." Like, I heard about the same book in 1 week. And both of those individuals have become two of my 3 mentors that I have. Jim, I'll meet with him literally today after we finish this recording. My next meeting is we meet twice a month, and I meet with Krista twice a month. And they've been so instrumental. And that book has been instrumental in really creating these 3 stages of transition. First, acknowledging the ending and loss of a transition, that things are going to change and stop. and really feeling that. And then going to this place he calls a neutral zone, which is where creativity can spark around. You don't really know what the new reality is going to look like before you get to a place of new beginnings, as he calls it. And I find we as leaders want to jump straight to the good stuff. We want to jump straight to the new beginnings. But unless we and help others around us really experience what is going to change and stop and go through that neutral zone to mind for the creativity of others around us, then we never will really get to new beginnings. And I think it's the lack of willingness of people to go through that transition process and to reframe what you're experiencing, especially at the beginning, as a positive thing, because it feels like ending. It feels like loss. It feels like I wouldn't do it this way on both sides of a transition. That actually seeing all of that as clarity getting created in the process of a healthy transition is critical to seeing a transition through it all.
Oh, powerful. And I love, because it's to your point earlier, that God provided mentors right on time, and that he often does that if we've got our eyes open, Craig. So just perfect place. It also, the core value of humility, it explains a lot to my next question, which we work with a lot of organizations, and we've noticed that Denison Ministries and all the entities underneath are pretty unique. Most organizations today are really about building their brand and, again, trying to help people understand who they are. But your organization approaches things differently in that you're wanting to amplify other voices and really, again, that better together mentality. Tell us more about how this has become really the key value of Denison Ministries.
Yeah, I think this speaks as well to the humility of my father and co-founder Jeff Baird, where when they started the organization for still most of our history to this point was centered around Dad and this content that he creates. He speaks right at the intersection of faith and culture through the Denison Forum and a daily email called the Daily Article that now resources like over 2 million people a month. The Denison Forum does. It's robust and his impact is huge, and he's had a phenomenal career in so many different ways. And from the very beginning, he said, I don't want this to be about me. I don't want it to live beyond me. This isn't going to be a one personality centric organization. And it took a while for the organization to figure out what other personalities could look like. First15 starting was a part of that process. The Heart Behind Christian Parenting was a part of that process. And now we look more multifaceted than we did at the start, but the heart was always there from the beginning. And I think one of the ways it has become a value, I think when you look at God as a model, you can see like even in the Trinity, he models what I think we can see is interdependence over being independent. And here in the US, we really value our independence, and we want to be the kind of people that are self-sufficient and can pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps and make something of ourselves and be successful in and of ourselves in our own capacities. But God himself is 3 in 1. You have the Father and the Spirit and the Son, and the Son came to magnify the Father, and the Holy Spirit magnifies the Son, and the Father loves the Son and lifts up the Son and has given him all authority. And there's all the scripture that speaks to each part of the Trinity lifting up one another and magnifying one another. And I think that's the model of relationship that he wants us to build our lives on, as relationship is the highest value that we would have, loving relationship. And inside of all of that, I think we have to recognize those of us that are vocational Christians in any way, and even without the sacred secular divide, like wherever you are and God's called you is your mission. And that's whether that's business or family or being a vocational Christian of sorts that are, actually plugging in every day with something directly related to our faith in a way that's verbal. I think that we can recognize that really our highest calling is to advance God's kingdom and not the individual institution or place that we're in. That our highest calling is to advance God's kingdom, and we're just get to be mostly immersed in a facet of that. And so we try to keep that value at Denison Ministries, that our primary call is advancing the whole of God's kingdom. And that means amplifying other voices. That means coming alongside and partnering and serving, and not just being blinders on and building walls around our entity and even valuing self-protection above all else, but genuinely seeking to play a role and recognizing it's a role in the broader kingdom of God. And whenever he calls us to do things that might not even necessarily look like the advancement of Denison Ministries, but are a clear call, we want to say yes to that. And creating space for other voices and magnifying voices as much as possible is a key way that we do that.
Well, Craig, it's refreshing. It's been refreshing for Terra and I to start the journey of relationship with you and Denison Ministries, and to have seen in our own process of getting to know you all, just that you guys aren't trying to live words or just have words up on the wall of values and this and that. You're actually you're trying to live them, not because you have to, but because you want to. And our friends at True Face Ministries and our friend Bill Thralls, he likes to say it this way. He says, like, the intention to have your theology transform your reality. And you guys are doing that individually in life, as a couple, you and Rachel, as an organization, as a family unit, the extended family unit that you're a part of. And it's encouraging to hear that. It is rare that those transitions go well. And you guys are off to a great start in that transition here, now 2 years and some into that journey. Speaking of you and your wife and you guys being in this in real time as parents, how do the two of you apply in your personal life the principles that you teach and are surrounded by within Denison Ministries and Christian parenting? And I guess, in other words, what does perfectly imperfect parenting look like in the Denison family?
It definitely looks perfectly imperfect. Circle around imperfect. Yeah, I think so. Rachel and I, part of what we do, we have a real value for counseling and therapy, and so we go to therapy. I actually have therapy every Friday morning. Rachel has it on Tuesday mornings, and we make space to process it every week. And I say that because, like after this last session that Rachel had, we were processing her session over lunch this week, and we were talking about just the value of recognizing that the pathway is through and not around. And what I mean by that is I'm so tempting to try to not create visibility to those things that are imperfect. It's so tempting to try to go around them and to try to mitigate any symptoms of problems. And so much stuff in families can get pushed under the rug and be kind of felt more than voiced. And that can do so much damage. And so we've been trying to get really okay with valuing honesty and vulnerability. If it's just how we feel and what we're thinking in the moment, like just saying it, knowing we might be wrong and ask for forgiveness later. Like the pathway is through and not around. And as much as we can be fully honest in the moment with each other, knowing that that's going to look messy and imperfect, that creates the amount of clarity that we need to be known by one another and to have an opportunity to grow and even feel forward, like we said, as it relates to being spouses and as it relates to being parents to these crazy boys that are 4 and 2. They're insane. Like we just got out of our parent teacher conference and laughing with the teacher at the crazy things that my 4-year-old does in class every day and things he says. And it's parenting is so hard and it feels like it changes so much even every day. And so I think that's been one of the key lessons in ways that we try to implement perfectly imperfect parenting is recognizing that we want to go through and not around as much as possible. And then I had this experience with God. It was right around the first few months of this leadership transition, and I was working too much. I was working a lot and I was traveling a lot. And we didn't have the right rhythms and support mechanisms for all that I was saying yes to in this leadership transition yet. We were learning those lessons the hard way. And I remember I was exhausted. One Saturday morning, I was sitting on the ground and was letting Rachel sleep in and was just sitting with my boys and playing with them. And in my mind were the million things that I wished I was doing for work in that moment. Cause all the things I didn't get to by the end of the workday on Friday, so common for me to work on the weekends. And I remember sitting there and I remember God breaking into that moment, kind of that tune your heart to the frequency of his presence kind of experience. I remember him breaking through and saying, why do you think that task list in your head is more important than playing trucks with your kids on the floor right now? Like, why do you think I think that's more important? Because I realized I did, when you think about the opportunity to create something that's going to impact millions of lives, surely that's more important than these 2 boys that are sitting on the ground in front of me. And I remember God breaking in saying, I care just as much about you sitting here and being fully present with these 2 boys as the task list that you didn't get to on Friday. And I've really tried to carry that experience forward and genuinely tried to not put the value of the world on my value system, but try to say yes to being fully immersed with my kids and carrying that value with them, that just getting time alone with them and with Rachel and being all in on that and then giving work and everything else what's left as the value system that I've tried to have. And It's been hard to implement and do, but the more that I figure out what that looks like and am willing to ultimately say no to things that feel important and even urgent in the moment for the value of importance of family, the more that I'm getting a picture of how key it is and how much more life-giving it is, and that all that stuff's going to get taken care of, or it won't, but it's okay. Like, God's kingdom is going to be fine. He's not nervous about the state of his kingdom based on my own productivity. And so I think I can kind of take the weight and the pressure off and say yes to what really matters most.
Well, there it is, your theology, what you believe and talk about as it relates to God transforming your actual reality, right? And it's just with the two boys playing trucks on the floor, and the significance of that is what the Father would say to you as a father, right? So I just thank you for that story, and for the way in which you're living your life and how you want to live it submitted to God, so that you can actually do these things that he's called you to do and is equipping you to do in a way that allows you to thrive in your relationship with him, to thrive in your relationship with Rachel, and her with you and your boys. And then outside of that comes these other ministry activities. And it's beautiful. So stay the course, brother.
Oh, Craig, we're so grateful for just all your wisdom, your life, just for who you are. So tell our listeners, how can they connect with you and find more about all your ministries?
Terra, Jeff, thanks so much for that encouragement, and thanks for having me on the podcast. As a longtime listener, it's fun to be a part. So I can say, I think probably the best place to go, it would be denisonministries.org. We have a lot of different resources through a lot of different brands, but if you're kind of interested in finding maybe resources that are most meaningful for you right now, that kind of, scratch the itch that you've got for resources that you might need, I go to denisonministries.org, and you can learn about the different things we do there.
Fantastic. And we'll have all of those details in our show notes as well if you missed that. But if maybe you're finding yourself in a similar position as Craig, and you're leading a large organization, and you're just wanting to find like-minded leaders to maybe journey with, a cohort of leaders who want to live and lead with integrity. No one is meant to navigate this journey of leadership alone, and our wholehearted leadership cohort might be a fit for you. You can learn more by visiting our website at livingwholehearted.com. Applications will open this summer for our next cohort, and space is limited, but we love walking with leaders and find this to be one of our greatest privileges.
Yeah, to learn more about how we're coming alongside leaders in the home, in work, and in community through our various resources, go to our website, livingwholehearted.com. And we've got some exciting things coming in partnership with Christian parenting, and we can't wait to share more with you. And sign up for our monthly newsletters, and you'll be the first to know. And find us at livingwholehearted.com, or follow us at living_wholehearted on Instagram, or Living Wholehearted on Facebook. Until next time, may God's peace be upon you. This podcast is powered by Living Wholehearted, Courageous Girls, and the Christian Parenting Podcast Network. Thank you for joining us in this critical movement of shrinking our integrity gaps between what we preach and live.